Hey Chris, welcome to the podcast. I've been looking forward to this month and for such a long time. How's everything going on your end?
Everything's good, man. I know this is our third attempt, so third time's a charm. I'm looking forward to this too, bro.
All good, no worries. As long as we get this started, I wanted to just ask you so many questions, man. Like your content on Twitter is amazing. You came from a real estate background. It probably was very difficult for you to switch over from real estate to Bitcoin because it's physical to digital. How did you get started in this? Like, what was your first taste of the rabbit hole?
Okay, so I wouldn't even call myself a real estate guy, right? I was
Mm,
just looking for any way to store my wealth. So I had a lot of
mm,
money in the stock market, I had money in real estate, and I was just, I identify like I'm a hustler. I was just trying to get some money, and I knew that making money and storing money are two completely different concepts. So right when I turned 18, I joined the army, and I like started reading about finance, and I understood that right away. Like, it's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. So, on my journey, I'm making money and then I'm storing it. So I realized, like, okay, storing money in the stock market is one thing, storing money in the real estate is another thing. But, I know I had to keep money put away for the long term. So I think because I was kind of like used to buying stocks online and just looking online. It wasn't the physical to digital thing that got me. It was like okay, if what people are saying about Bitcoin is right, the entire system is wrong, and that was the
yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. So where do you think this is going? Do you think that Bitcoin could take over everything? That's where I come from. I actually think that Bitcoin is going to take over everything. Like there's nothing that Bitcoin can't absorb. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that eventually it's going to be common sense, right? So
Yeah.
so I think if you go down the path of the line of thinking that, okay, this is just digital capital, it's just a place to store your money, right? And we're not going to transact in it. It's just a place to store your money. Even if you were to start thinking that way, you would say, well, eventually people aren't going to want to accept fiat currencies anymore, right? So if you're selling a table and I want to buy your table, you're gonna be like, hey, can you just pay me in this thing, or I sell it in this thing. So with that being said, yeah, it wouldn't make sense. It's the same reason people don't pay you in grass right now. Like people
Yeah.
will eventually just stop accepting what's not valuable.
Yeah. Whenever I say that, people get so angry. Oh, nobody's going to want fiat. Nobody's going to want pieces. Why would anybody want pieces of paper? Right?
Yeah.
Like if you're creating something out of like you're using your time value, your resources, you're using your skills, you're putting in all this effort to produce something. Why would you want pieces of paper for it?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And I think that that's kind of like the it'll will eventually become common sense. And I think when it becomes common sense, we're probably looking at a $10 million plus Bitcoin, or maybe a $5 million plus Bitcoin, or the fact that we won't even price things in dollars anymore. We would stop looking at it like that. So I think that we're on the path where this becomes common sense. And I would like to get as many people who follow me or look to me for guidance on this path before it becomes common sense. Because like people tell others like, oh yeah, all you got to do is invest in the S&P 500 and you're good, or all you got to do is just go get a home loan, go get a duplex, and you're good. And that's kind of common sense, and people don't really argue with that anymore. And I think,
Yeah.
well, the difference is by the time people on CNN or on Yahoo Finance are writing articles about the easiest path to wealth is just putting 20-30% of your paycheck into Bitcoin, by the time that comes, you'll be buying into a $5 million Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it just gets harder and harder for people to accumulate that one Bitcoin. What do you think should be somebody's goal right now to accumulate as like a minimum? Where do you think people should be?
Well, the spectrum between the wealth spectrum in the world is so like it's
Massive, yeah.
yeah, it's massive. So I wouldn't even put a number on it. Like in
Mm,
my community, I challenge everyone to get to one Bitcoin, but I realize that there's some people who that's nearly impossible. But what I will say is 20 to 30% of all your income into Bitcoin, right?
yeah,
Like
just whatever you can afford.
yeah, whatever you can afford, 20 to 30%. Because when we 10x from here, then even your $50 that you were putting away a month is now $500, which is $6,000 a month. So even the people who were kind of at the bottom of the financial scale now you're like, okay, well, all my savings 10x, right? And then there are some people, when I was buying in on this that the FTX sell off, when I was buying into that, there were some people like, hey, bro, I'm following you in. I just bought 15 Bitcoin with you, and I'm like,
Wow.
there's a big gap between the finances of some of the people who follow me and some of the people, and some of the other people. So I would say like it, not even a specific number, like in general, I challenge people to get to one Bitcoin. But what I think is the most important thing is for you to make it automatic, that 20-30% of your income, and then climb from there. So if you did 20% last year, do 30% this year, do 35 next year. And
Yeah.
I would encourage people to look at it like that.
Have you noticed yourself increasing your allocation to Bitcoin over time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
bro, Bitcoin sends you down this rabbit hole. You start like, you get some money, you get some fake money, and you're like, why do I need any of this? What am I doing with any of this? So yeah, it started off actually, like, if you look at it, like, let's pretend like you're like a traditional stock investor. If you're looking at Apple as a slice of your portfolio, or maybe you're looking at like, technology as a slice of your portfolio, right? But and you just throw Bitcoin in there, and then the more you learn, you're like, this isn't comparing Apple to Bitcoin. This is comparing,
Hmm.
a protocol that Apple would be built on top of. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh no, I actually don't even want these assets that are priced in dollars or denominated in dollars that look like they go up, but they don't go up. Like, because as
Yeah.
soon as you start pricing things in Bitcoin, everything's falling, and you're like, yeah, my allocation to Bitcoin is going to be everything.
Can you give my audience and whoever sees this, can you tell them why Bitcoin is outperforming everything? Like,
So we've never, as a human race, seen absolute scarcity in things, right? Or
mm,
even if we have seen absolute scarcity in something, it hasn't been in money, right?
yeah.
So what's happening is we have a system that's pumping unlimited amounts of fiat currency, right? And this is how most of the major governments are paying for things. They have a central bank. The central banks are loaning the money into existence. So it's not like the central banks are out, I don't know, mining for gold, and then they say, okay, we have so much gold, we'll give the United States government some of it. No, they're literally creating the money and loaning it away to, let's say, the US government, and the Federal Reserve is loaning money to the US government. So they're creating all this money. So if you're looking on the fiat currency side of things, we have a faucet that does not turn off. And that's money creation. It does not turn
mm,
off. So if you have a faucet of money that does not turn off, and it's going into something that has a limited supply like Bitcoin, well, think about it like putting a balloon underneath the faucet, right? The balloon, you're not going to make two balloons. You're not going to make three balloons. What's going to happen is the balloon itself is just going to expand and expand and expand.
wow.
So the way that I see it is, as long as that faucet doesn't turn off, Bitcoin's going to grow at a crazy rate. Now, even if the faucet were to turn off, people would still realize that Bitcoin's a superior money to everything else, because it's, you can move it faster, it's more secure. So even without the unlimited inflation, we would probably still come to the conclusion that a digital money is better than a physical money. So that's the way that I look at it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great. I like the balloon analogy. So even if it stops, even if the water stops flowing into the balloon, because people are going to. So if the faucet stops flowing, if people start using cups and start filling up the
Yep,
balloon, like they start
exactly.
taking it out of other cups. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. So there's other cups of things that, you
Yeah.
would say, well, okay, I had this cup under the faucet, so I've been saving money in real estate, right? I'm going to dump
Yeah.
some of that into and the balloon just keeps expanding, keep expanding. But the main thing that we have, and the most obvious thing that we have, is the faucet of printing unlimited fiat currencies.
Right, and it's just gonna keep growing because they can borrow money into existence,
Yeah.
right? I think that's what people just can't wrap their heads around. I keep telling people, the money that you're saving is literally worthless. It's only worth something because we trust that it's worth something. If
Yep.
that trust fades, and that trust is fading, even the wealthiest people in the world don't want to hold U.S. dollars. Even Americans don't want to hold U.S. dollars because they're giving them away to buy Bitcoin. The biggest institution in the world, the one that's supposed to be backing this currency, is negative on it. They're short on this currency. So you like where this
Yeah.
they're like $37 trillion in debt because they
And
know that the
and that
value is going
number
to
is
decrease.
growing. I look at it every
Yeah.
day. The US debt clock, I look at it every day. And what's even crazier is like the faucet's not going to turn off. It can't. If we turn the
No, I
faucet off,
can't.
the whole empire collapses. So,
Yeah.
I just kind of put two and two together. I say, well, if inflation is going to make this thing grow at a faster rate than normal, and we know we have to inflate the money away, we have to, we kind of have to create more money in order to pay for all of our debts, right? We have to shrink the value of the dollar. It needs to find a home. All that new money needs to find a home somewhere. So
Yeah.
it's a process of elimination for where the home is going to be, right? So you're going to say, am I going to store my money in equities? Am I going to store my money in real estate? Am I going to store my money in collectibles? Am I going to store my money here? So you just run through this process of elimination, and you get to the point where you say, well, if I store my money in real estate, that becomes like an attack vector, right? So
Hmm.
if they wanted to squeeze you, so if they know that, okay, this is your house, and or there's so much wealth in real estate, we need to squeeze some of the juice out. Well, they'll just increase the property taxes, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe the local HOA that you have will say like, "Hey, give us some more money," right? Like it's a real physical, obvious thing that I understand that you have wealth because it's sitting right there. Why don't these people in these big houses pay for this, or why don't just becomes an attack vector. So you'll eventually rule out real estate as an investment, right? And then you have the human side of things, which are like your tenants. Like, man, like, okay, maybe I bought a house and I'm cash flowing X amount of money, but one repair that's due to a human error, and now I coughed up my cash flow for this month, right?
Mm.
Or to even think that even if you are cash flowing, the rate in which you're paying down the loan that you had, it doesn't the beginning of the loan is just straight interest. You're just paying majority interest, so even if you think you found a path to beat the system, you're really just complying with the system. So I think it's a process of elimination. You move to stocks and you say, well, a stock can only grow so far because eventually what the stock is valued at has to be near a multiple of their earnings. So if the stock isn't growing forever with their earnings, then the stock price should only grow so far. And once it gets too overvalued, then it will sell off, or they'll just issue more shares. If it gets too hot. So you're like, man, I don't want to be diluted. I don't want my wealth to be taxed away. I don't want it to be confiscated. I don't want to because let's go back to real estate. If you were to talk about the property taxes, that's not something you're voting for. They just assess the
No.
value up and allow you to argue against why they shouldn't. But they're going to assess the value up. You think, oh, my house was worth $1 million, now it's worth 1.5 million. Cool, here comes some more property taxes. You know, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a
And
process of elimination.
And you know what the crazy thing with property taxes is? Because we don't have any vote for it, people still think, oh, they can't increase the property tax. They won't increase the property tax. But as soon as they do, like it's going to be a surprise. It's not like they're going to tell you in advance, oh, we're increasing your property taxes by this much, and it's going to skyrocket. And they're not going to tell you that. They're going to do it overnight.
Yep.
And by the time it's done, your property has lost a ton of its value because the market knows we're going to have to pay this property tax in order to own this property. So why would we want to own this property?
Exactly. So I was even thinking about this. Okay, so if the value of your property goes up, then the insurance goes up, right? So my insurance,
Yeah.
one of my houses doubled, right? In the last 3 years, it's doubled. Like the insurance itself, my premium doubled.
Wow.
So imagine you're thinking, okay, if this was a fair and honest system, I should
Hmm.
be able to earn some money and then just, sit in, let's say if I'm on fixed income and I'm making $50,000 a year and my expenses are $25,000 a year, right? Well,
Mm.
I get my fixed income because I'm retired. I just pay for, my property taxes. I pay for my food. I pay for these things and I'm good. I put my time in. I put 45 years into working in the system. But what ends up happening is if the property taxes are increasing, if the cost of the food is increasing, the cost of the gasoline or the oil is increasing, if the cost of insurance is increasing, healthcare is increasing, if everything's going up, eventually my cushion starts getting eaten at. And then you go, oh, well, I need to go back to work. And you're like,
Yeah.
so the incentive to just beat the game. And then, when you're 65 years old, you can kick back and relax. Well, they're stealing that from people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's getting worse. More and more people aren't able to get to that point. Like they're never going to be able to get to that point where they can actually be free and they don't have to work for a living, and instead they can live off their assets. But the thing is that in this system, the way that I see it in this system, there's one group of people who can live off their assets, and then there's another group of people who will never will have that opportunity, because the people who can live off their assets in the past, they were able to borrow a certain amount of money. They were able to borrow money that was created out of thin air to buy a real asset, and then bump the price of that asset up, and it keeps going up and it keeps going up. It's like baby boomers. They were able to buy their houses for like $800, and now they're worth 800,000.
Yeah,
Right?
it isn't it crazy that we don't think like, okay, if we continue on this path, if my grandpa
Hmm.
bought a house for 8 grand and I have to buy one for 400 grand, and my grandchild's gonna have to build one for 8 million, or my great grandchildren is gonna have to build, and you're like, at some point, do we realize that a higher number doesn't mean anything? So if the nominal
Hmm.
value of things just grow, like you think that's a good thing, but it's not. It's not about the number going up. It's about more purchasing power. So if you aren't
Yeah.
getting more purchasing power, then you're getting poor. Even if the numbers on your screen go up, even if your stock, even if the S&P 500 is at an all-time high, or the value of your real estate has tripled on paper, if you cannot buy more things, then you aren't getting wealthier. And I think that that's kind of a concept that people are going to wrestle with or struggle with, before they completely understand the value proposition of Bitcoin. Hey, I'm here to get more purchasing power, right? Not to get a higher number. If you wanted more money in a nominal value, then just go to I don't know, Nigeria, and swap your euros out, and you'll
Yeah.
have more. You're not gonna
Yeah.
have more
Yeah.
purchasing power, but you'll have more of these units.
Yeah. So would you say that Bitcoin is the only savings tool and everything else is an investment?
Yeah, I would.
Do you agree with
Yeah,
that statement?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Bitcoin,
Yeah.
yeah, Bitcoin's a savings technology. It's my method of storing my wealth. Everything else
Hmm.
is an investment, because I believe everything else becomes speculation, right?
How does that apply to real estate? Like, why is real estate speculation? I know the answer, but I want you to explain it in your words, because you give such great examples.
Well, there's so many different ways that you are speculating on real estate. So one, to purchase a rental property, and when I say real estate, I mean rental property. I don't mean your personal house.
Yeah.
Like if you
Yeah.
want to buy a house for your family, do your thing. But I mean like as an investment. So you're also assuming that other people are going to invest there. You're assuming that you're going to find good tenants. You're going to assume that the value of this thing is going to go up. You're going to assume that they don't continue to tax you at a higher rate, because if your tax rate goes from 6% to 10% over 4 or 5 years, or over 10 years, you're losing value there. So in order for you to store your money there in real estate, then you have to assume these things won't happen, which is a speculation. I'm going to, even to say that I trust my tenants won't destroy my house, you're speculating,
Yeah.
right? When I know that it's more of a certainty thing that no one's going to steal my Bitcoin, right? I
Yeah.
secured it the right way. I believe no one's going to take it. It'd be very,
Yeah.
very, very hard. So I think the more that you start to understand Bitcoin as an asset and Bitcoin as a network, then you start to see that, this is a lot safer than we think, right?
Yeah.
And even this is why I preach about the concepts of risk versus volatility, because people will say it's too
Hmm.
risky, right? So let's do this. Like, let's put ourselves 200 years in the future, right? And then people are learning about ancient America or ancient Britain, right? And then they're like, so people are like studying ancient America, ancient Britain. They're like, they had access to Bitcoin when it was only $50,000, or it was only $100,000. Like by that time, it had a 900,000% return. Like I'm sure everybody back then got wealthy, right?
Hmm.
Because you just look on a chart and you just see this thing go straight up and to
Yeah.
the right? So you're just going to assume all the people of this nation or of these nations got wealthy. But then when you put yourself in modern times, there's other people who are trying to talk you out of it. and they're trying to
Yeah.
talk you out of it based on the research and the knowledge they have not done.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, hey, I heard this or I heard this, and they're just echoing. And the deeper you start to learn about it, you're like, yeah, this is pretty safe, bro.
Yeah.
Like this is pretty safe. All I have to do is stomach the volatility. That's,
Yeah.
and make sure that I store my Bitcoin, the proper way. But that's it. Don't panic sell.
Yeah. I think back to what you were saying about speculative for real estate, like just tying in with what you were saying now. I think real estate is also speculative because you're expecting that your government's going to maintain your property rights, that they're not going to take them away,
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like with
You're
Bitcoin, that
right.
that doesn't happen.
Think
We
about like
can stop.
squatters.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, like squatters.
and
Like
they,
that's an assumption that you make that, hey, the government's going to allow me to stay in my place or allow me to kick someone out of my place if they choose to not
yeah,
pay their rent. And then the government goes, oh yeah, actually no, bro, because everyone's entitled to live somewhere, so they got to live with you.
yeah,
And you're like, whoa, what's going on here? I
yeah,
had the issue with during COVID. Um, I stopped charging some of my tenants rent during COVID, and I'm like, okay, this will give them enough time to get their money together, blah blah blah. So,
Oh, you did it
uh,
by choice.
yeah, I did it by choice. All right, I did it by
Okay.
choice, and I didn't charge them for like 8 months, 9 months,
Wow.
and then when I eventually did say, hey, like, okay, it's time for you guys to start paying rent, they stopped completely. And then
Oh,
I had to threaten them with an eviction, and then they eventually just got up and left. And I'm like, it creates a counterparty risk, right? It creates this counterparty risk. And I know, what my tenants did for work. I know that they were still employed. I know these things, like,
yeah.
so, if your audience is watching, it's not like, hey, they lost their job, or no, I know they were still gainfully
They're
employed. I
still
just
working.
wanted
Yeah.
them to, get a little cushion because nobody knew how long the COVID thing was going to last.
Yeah.
And then when they have or when they had a good sum of money stacked up, and they're like, okay, we can start paying, or we can just stay here and use the legal system against him. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if you are going to evict me, it's going to take 3-4 months, at minimum to get me out of here. And by that time, I can find somewhere else to live. And it just ended up becoming a headache. And you're like, man, I don't even want these, counterparty risk.
It's not even worth it. It's not even
Yep.
worth it. It's like if you give them something and they want so much more back, like they're just going to take advantage of you. And a lot of people are like that because that's just human nature,
Yep. And
right?
another thing too is, think about this. Let's say let's play the opposite side of this. You have great tenants. All right. Let's say you have great tenants that always make their payments, and they always,
Hmm.
they're taking care of your property. They do everything they do. They're the perfect tenant, right? Ideally, they're the perfect tenant. Okay, well, the Federal Reserve issues more US dollars and loans it to the government. The government needs to increase taxes in order to pay some of that back, allegedly. So then they increase your property taxes. And then, well, they assess the value of your house up, and then they increase your property taxes. And then the insurance company says, hey, your house is worth more now, so you got to pay a higher premium. Now you have no choice but to increase the rent on the good tenants. And you're
Yeah.
like, in order for you to survive in this real estate investment world, it's like you still need to step on someone else. So
Yeah.
even if your tenants, you're like, I'm doing a good thing by providing them like a safe place to stay, and they're paying their rent, everything's good. Well, things that are outside of my control are now going to force me to increase your cost of living. So they increase my cost of living by devaluing my currency. Now I need to increase your cost of living. So in order for me to stay afloat, I need to step on you a little bit. And it just becomes a game where you're like, I don't want to participate in this.
Yeah. The way that I see it is your tenant is a slave to you because they have to pay you no matter what. Like they're doing the work, they have to go to their job and they have to earn their money and then they have to pay you. But you're a slave to the bank because the bank has full control over you, right? If you don't pay them, they're going to
Yep.
take your house, right?
Yep.
They're going to take your
Exactly.
asset,
Now,
which is crazy.
imagine in that scenario that I just gave you, where you're now telling the tenant, like, hey, I got to increase your rent because you don't want to eat all the extra costs that are coming. But
Hmm.
imagine that tenant's employer is not giving them a pay raise,
Yeah.
right? So you're like, okay, well, your rent's going up by X amount and they can't get a pay raise. So as long as your cost of operation keeps increasing, and let's say even if they do get a pay raise, it's not increasing at the same rate that your cost of operation, and you're passing this cost off to your tenant, And you're like, man, like this sucks because I'm actually making their life harder.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think either way it goes,
And
I'm
you're
like,
forced
man,
to do it.
yeah, I don't want to play this game. I don't want to play this
Yeah.
game at all anymore. You know?
Yeah. It really is a game, right? I mean, you're basically you're controlling somebody else's life. Like you're trying you have to extract wealth from other people in order to survive in this game,
Yep.
because no matter what, your costs are going to go up, their costs are going to go up. So there's people who are they can barely pay for their own rent, but then they have to support their landlord's rent and their landlord's lifestyle as well, which to me it's more about morals. Like I can't
Yep.
do that. I can't tell somebody that, oh, if you are already paying $3,000 a month, you need to bump this payment up to 3,500, even
Yep.
though you can't even afford 3,000. You can't even afford to put food on your table at the $3,000 level. And it's not even the landlord's fault. Like the landlord isn't the bad person here,
Yeah.
right?
They're
That's like
just passing off the cost.
exactly. And now it's changed. So actually, I wanted to do a little pivot. So we basically talked about why we should buy Bitcoin, and I think your explanations were great. I know that in your group you talk about how to generate more money and how to build more money to accumulate more Bitcoin. Do you have any tips for my audience on what they can do to grow their income? I think it would be generally to build a business, but what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so the way that I kind of built out my framework on how to make more money, right? So it all started with me learning about the stock market. So when I was
Hmm.
18 years old, I started learning about the stock market, and then I started realizing, well, in order for this company, let's say Nike, to make more money, then they need to offer more products, or they need to get their products in a different, in different areas of the world. They need to increase their costs, all that stuff. So I said, okay, well, if I were the business, what would I do, or how would I go about it? So I came up with this formula. So the formula is, step one, you need a product, service, or information, right? So a product, I own a watch company, right? A service, I will build e-commerce brand for you. Information, I sell a book, or I sell a course, or I sell whatever, right? A product, a service, or
Hmm.
information. You pick one of those three. The second step is you need a place to sell that, right? So if my grandpa had a watch company, he would need a storefront. I can do this on the internet. I can use Shopify, right? So it reduces the cost of me setting up shop by a lot. So a product or service or information, step one. Step two is you need a place to sell that, and then step three would be getting traffic to your place that you're going to sell it, right? So that would be you getting traffic to your website. So what I started doing is I started figuring out, okay, what is it that I want to make? What is it that I want to sell? Right? Like I said, I have a watch company, or I have a service, or I have this information, and then the place that I'm going to sell it is going to be connected to my social media, right?
Hmm.
So now I need to generate traffic in order to get people to find me and to, eventually find the websites or wherever. So the easiest way for you to do that is to get in front of like-minded people, right? So you don't want to go sell, well, you do want to go sell, let's say, running shoes in front of a fitness community. So if there's a fitness community out there, you either go put yourself in that fitness community, you start making content about, fitness or running or whatever, and then people will naturally find you. Or you can run advertisements in, Facebook groups, things like that, right? Instagram pages, like meme pages. So this is kind of how I got my start. And then when it came to, let's say, information about, like, let's say, Bitcoin. So for the people who are interested in Bitcoin, they're watching this. The reason they're watching this is because they found you, and they found you because you offer valuable information on social media about it, right? So so if you think about it like this, you become the subject matter expert, and then you're going to attract like-minded people. Now, how can you help them? That's all that this all boils down to, is how can I help them? How can I serve someone? Right? Some people might want to do a one-on-one on how to take self-custody, and they don't mind giving you a few bucks for
Yeah.
your time, or some people might want to, whatever. You're hosting seminars or workshops or whatever the case is. But the whole name of the game is you keep your customer in mind, because what you're doing is just you're just exchanging value, right? I have this thing, you have what I want, which is money, right? This company Zara had a sweater, I wanted the sweater, I had $40, we exchanged, right? So you're like, how is it that I can offer something, or what is it that I can offer in exchange for extra income? Once you get that income, store it in Bitcoin, right? So I think the most important thing is finding solutions to problems. And because we'll never run out of problems, we'll never run out of solutions. So you make yourself useful. If you make yourself useful enough, you get paid for it.
Wow. Yeah, and I think in the internet era, it's just become more and more. It's become easier and easier to find an audience, to find a network, to find like a funnel, I guess. Because
Mm-hmm.
now anybody can start a Twitter page. Anybody can. Let's say, for example, I think the things that people want the most. Number one, they want to get rich,
Yep.
right? Number two, they want to get fit, right?
Yep.
Number three, I would say they want to solve. They want their family to be comfortable. They want entertainment,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
right? What else? What else do you think people really
Relationships.
want?
Relationships.
Relationships, yeah,
Yeah. Some people even struggle with the idea of finding a mate, you know, and you have
yeah,
dating
yeah,
coaches. You have, so I think there's kind of these basic human uh, wants and needs that we have, and a lot of people are going to struggle with them, you know. So there
yeah,
may be some guy out there who's, I don't know, a software developer, and he makes a good amount of money, and he's willing to pay, you know, pay you if you help him get in shape, right?
yeah,
Or there might be some guy who's really, you know, really fit, and he's willing to pay you if you help him learn how to, you know, get a job in the software development space. There's all types
yeah,
of ways that you can serve people, but it starts with serving people. It starts with, uh, I'm going to provide more in value than I asked for back in money, right? So if you give me
yeah,
$50, I'm giving you $200 worth of stuff, right? Whether that's a product,
yeah,
service, or information. And then what happens when that happens, then they're like, okay, this guy is of quality, or this brand is of quality. And then you create customers that stay for a lifetime. There's people that buy things, or people that support me on the internet that have been supporting me since 2016, you know, and they've
yeah.
bought everything I've ever sold. And you're like, you over deliver. That's kind of the name of the game, you know?
That's it.
So delivering, and the key to getting anything that you want in the world is helping other people get what they want in the world. So if a bunch of people want to get fit, you help them get fit. If a bunch of people want to grow their wealth, you figure out a way to help them grow their wealth, you know? So you're just serving other people.
Yeah, that's it. That's a great. I think that's so important to understand. I think most people think, oh, entrepreneurs are just extracting value from society. They're so rich. There's no reason for them to be. Oh, this guy has $10 million. Why does he have $10 million? He doesn't deserve it. He should give it to me. But the way that you put
That's
it,
yeah,
right?
they always end with that that last one.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
should give it to me. You
He
should give
doesn't deserve it, so give it to me. Yeah, yeah. But the thing is that the way that you put it, people are actually creating value. They're solving problems. They
hmm
went out of their way and they did this thing that helped other people. Like for example, when I started talking about Bitcoin, I started talking more about Bitcoin at the end of 2023, and I
hmm
made these webinars where I'd basically go through all of the basics. Like this would probably be like 1,000 hours of research for somebody if they didn't want to take this webinar. Like they'd have to wrap their head around this and this and this, and I charge them $50.
hmm
Like the people who actually took these webinars, some of them they bought like 100 Bitcoin
Yeah,
off that
yeah.
information, and think about
hmm
how much value that they got. Like I'm
Yep.
perfectly okay with that, right? Like
You
if
saved them a
somebody
bunch
is
of time. Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
right, and
exactly.
and now they're not having their money debased. Now their
hmm
money is saved for the rest, and these people are probably going to be customers of mine for the rest of my life because I changed their life so drastically. Probably the same, exactly the same thing with what you're saying there
Yep,
with people who have supported you since 2016. They're going to continue to support you for life.
yep. And it's actually like, think about all the Bitcoin books that you like, right? Or all the
Yeah.
great Bitcoin books that you like. Like, do you don't think about it like Saifedean is making a bunch of money selling. He sold a
Mm,
million copies. You're like, he gave me information. I'm glad. I'll buy 10 copies. You know, like, I'm glad
yeah.
this guy's put in his energy to learn all this stuff, to turn around and put it in a book. All I have to do is pay him for the book and read it. Right?
Yeah.
Take my money, you know, but that's the way that the way I see things, and the way that the people who are like, oh, this person has this amount of money and they shouldn't have it. I've been thinking about this. There's some people you don't want to agree with. There's some people you don't want to get along with, right? So if you
Yeah.
think that I shouldn't be paid for solving problems, I probably don't want to be your friend. right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
so yeah, so certain people, they aren't going to get it, or they aren't going to see how civilization is built by people who go out of their way to solve problems. Look how we're talking on Riverside right now. There's an entrepreneur had to create that. So do I
Yeah,
care that the guy has $250 million for creating another version of Zoom? No, I'm glad
yeah.
he did it so we can talk.
Yeah. And it's that's exactly it, right? Like you're there people say, "Oh, this is um it's saturated." Like before I started my YouTube channel, everybody was telling me, "No, no, no. Don't start a YouTube channel. Don't start a personal finance account on Instagram because it's saturated. So many people have this information out there." But that's the thing. People want your story.
Yep.
They don't care about those other people's stories. I think that's what holds people back. People think, oh, there's a clothing brand. No, I'm not going to start it because it's saturated. There's
Yeah.
a this or there's a that. I'm not going to start it because it's saturated. I'm just going to keep working my 9 to 5. I'm going to keep struggling. I'm going to keep getting screwed over by my employer who isn't going to pay me the right wage.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep complaining about how I have problems, how I can't afford. But I think it's pretty
It,
simple, like what you laid out there.
Yeah, it's crazy. Or think about it like this: like you said, me and you can sell the same exact thing. Like we can have the same
Hmm.
exact webinar, that the one that you were selling for $50. You can present it, I can present it. Some people are gonna be like, "Oh, I like Chris's analogies," and some people are gonna like yours. Some people are gonna
Absolutely.
identify with your story. Some people are gonna identify with my story. That's the beauty of a marketplace, right? That's
Yeah.
that's that's the beauty of it all. So you can't be oversaturated. Like you are the niche. You are the vessel. You know, the
Ah, yeah.
internet just
Wow. You are the
gives
niche. Yeah.
you the opportunity to connect with people, right?
Yeah.
So even sometimes, like when I make those videos and I post them on Twitter, like there's some people that criticize me because the way I talk or I wear jewelry or whatever, and you're like, this ain't for you, bro. Because
Yeah.
if you want one of those guys who have a suit and a tie who can explain Bitcoin to you, go to them. And I think that's actually one of the coolest things about Bitcoin is it connects everybody from every walk of life, right?
That's it.
So there should be a Bitcoin for Farmers podcast. There should be a Bitcoin for military vets podcast. There should be a
Yeah.
Bitcoin for athletes. And then you start realizing that all these subsets of all of society all connect around this one thing because we all have the same problem. But some
Yeah.
people would rather hear the information from you. Some people would rather hear it from me. Some people would rather hear it from someone else. Somebody would probably rather hear it from a woman,
Yeah.
because they're like, well, I'm a woman. I wouldn't want to hear it from a woman's perspective. And then there's a woman telling a story about how she couldn't own money in her country and she had to hide it from people. And all she did was store 12 words and she left her country and went to Europe. Now she can have money. That's going to inspire the hell out of
Yeah.
women, like, so
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like you are the vessel, like it's you,
Yeah.
like you are special. It's why I don't mind putting myself out there. And that's why I think that it's cool. Cause some people are going to find you, like what I know is so crazy, man. Uh, me and my brother, he was like, bro, I got to show you this guy on YouTube. You're going to like him. And he pulled up your page. I said, man, I watch him all the time,
Wow.
And we
That's
sit,
so
cause we
funny.
watch all the Bitcoiners, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to hear, I don't care if everyone reported on the same thing the same day, right? If
Yeah.
everyone made a video about their strategic reserve, well, I want to hear your perspective of it. And then I want to hear this guy's perspective of it. And then I want to hear this because
Yeah.
everyone has a different background. Everyone has a different, everyone can explain it a little different. So I might watch 30 videos about the same thing. And I appreciate everyone for
Yeah.
making it. So I don't think
And
everything is,
every single video has some nuance that the other videos missed. I think
yeah.
that's the key. Like that's why I like to just do as much research as I can. Like whenever I try to listen to a podcast, I'm going to listen to 10 podcasts. I'm going to listen to 20 podcasts. You started a podcast, by the way. I want to give you a shout out on that.
Oh, thank
I
you.
haven't listened I haven't listened to any of them, but I've heard clips on Twitter and they're great. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
Check,
the
check it out
key
when you
here,
check it out when you get time, when you
absolutely.
get some time, man.
I'm going to link it in the description. I'll link it for you.
Thank
So
I
just
appreciate that.
push some traffic there. But I think the key is all the nuances, all the different opinions that people have. Like everybody comes from a different walk of life. Everybody
Yep.
has a different perspective. You
Hmm.
have a completely different perspective on Bitcoin than I do, right? Because is this everybody has their own way of putting it out there. Everybody has their own way of saying things, and that's what really makes the difference. But then when people tell you, "Oh, it's oversaturated, it's this, it's that," don't let that hold you back. Like
Yeah.
if
You're
people can
just not
make
my
ad
audience.
revenue on
Yeah.
Twitter, if people can make ad revenue on Twitter, do it. Why
Hmm.
wouldn't you, right?
Yep.
You've spent hours. I think people have spent thousands of hours of their life learning about this thing. So why
Yep.
wouldn't they share their information, right? There's
Yep.
always going to be somebody who wants that information.
I also think too. Okay, so imagine you have your family and your friends, right? You have
Hmm.
your family, your friends, and you have the people that you know, and then you have the people that you affect online by sharing your message. Imagine you spend all that time learning about Bitcoin and you're like, I'm about to just put all my money into Bitcoin, but you never say anything to anybody else, right? So
Yeah.
you're just getting wealthier and everybody else is like hurting from the system, right? The system
Yeah.
keeps like crushing them. The inflation monster keeps crushing them, and you're like, I'm getting wealthier, you know. So when I think about it like that, I'd be like, you would be selfish not to share information. If you
Absolutely.
learn something that can help somebody, you would be extreme. Like if you were my friend and you learned all this stuff and didn't tell me about it, I'd be like, yeah, you're not my friend, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that like it creates like this incentive to go share information. You know, like, hey,
Yeah.
bro, this thing could help everybody in the world. That's another reason why I think that Bitcoin is going to take over it's going to reprice everything because everybody has the same problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Everybody has the same problem. Yeah.
yep,
Yeah, it's true. No matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are, eventually your money is going to be taken from you either through property taxes, through inflation, through some form of theft. Your money is going to be taken from you, and
yep.
there's no way to actually sustain it unless you have Bitcoin, which to me is just crazy. I want to ask you, Chris. You post a lot about books that you read about Bitcoin. What are your top? I'd say top five, maybe even top three books. What are your favorite three books about Bitcoin that you've read?
Um, Fiat ruins everything,
Okay.
right?
Oh, by Jimmy Song.
Jimmy Song. That's a very good book because what you realize is you might even you come for the number go up, you stay for the revolution, right? Like you don't realize how many different aspects of life are affected by broken money, right? So
Yeah.
it's the education, it's the food, it's the family life, it's all these things that are affected from broken money. So I think that kind of gave me like a whoa, this thing is way bigger than what I think. Um, The Price of Tomorrow, Jeff Booth.
Oh yeah,
That was a
that was
very,
huge.
very good book. Jeff Booth's actually my favorite Bitcoiner, right? And it took me a while to understand what he was saying. You know, the first podcast that I watched from him, I'm like, I don't get it. You know, he's talking about deflation, he's talking about all these things. And then I read the book and then I rewatched the podcast, the same episode, and I'm like, oh my God, he's right. Things should be getting cheaper, right? So think about this. Okay, so I keep this like reference or this like yeah in my mind all the time that things should be getting cheaper based on our ability to produce it faster and you know at a more efficient rate. So even think about something like this in America, right? I'm American. I'll use America. In America in 1970, there was about 180,000 millionaires,
Hmm.
right? 180,000. We're talking about a fifth of a million. Now,
Yeah.
just 50 years later, there's like 50 million, 60 million millionaires in the whole world, right? So in America, there's probably 40 million millionaires. So the amount of millionaires
Yeah.
in 50 years has grown so much. But then you'll see a report saying, like, hey, the average person can't afford a $500 emergency, or the average 401k balance for a retiree is $80,000, right? So then you go, where's all the wealth? We have all these millionaires. Where's all the wealth? Right. And what I start to realize is it's stored in these things or assets that are just being like propped up by the money printer. Right.
Yeah.
And you start to realize like the cost of the houses shouldn't be going up. It should be going down because we can make them more efficiently. Right. Or to think like maybe your Netflix. If you have on Netflix, maybe let's say you have access to 20,000 movies, right? And you pay $15 to get access to 20,000 movies. Now let's go back 20 years and you have to go to Blockbuster and rent out 20,000 movies, right?
It's gonna
That
cost you
cost
like
you
200 grand.
$40,000. It went
Yeah.
from $40,000 to have access to 20,000 movies to 15 bucks, right? And
Yeah.
you just realize, like, yeah, it's the technology. It's making everything. In theory, things should be getting cheaper, but they're not because we keep putting more units into the whole system. So Jeff Booth opened my mind to that, and he's my favorite Bitcoiner. And The Price of Tomorrow is a good book. The third one would probably, I'm gonna go with probably Broken Money, or even, you know
Mm.
what, Thank God for Bitcoin is a really good book too. Thank God for Bitcoin. I use that, or I like that to to tell beginners to start there, because what ends up happening is the title's kind of wild. Thank God for Bitcoin. Like, what is this, a religion, right? And you're like, no, what it is biblically, you're supposed to be a good steward of your money, right? You're supposed to be a good steward. The church could serve more people if, you know, if they were or had access to good money. So you realize, like, okay, I'm supposed to look after my family. I'm supposed to be a good steward of my money according to the Bible, but I can't. But why can't I? Because of this problem. You know, so
Mm.
I think when people have no idea about Bitcoin, I tell them, read Thank God for Bitcoin, right? You start realizing like you have an obligation to, or like a fiduciary responsibility to you know, be solid with your money, and you can't, it's being undermined. And the last one, I know you said three, but the last one I'll say is Broken Money by Lynn Alden. And I think that's a really good book because she talks about how, let's say, like the predatory loans of the IMF, or she talks about these things that you don't realize like are going on, you know.
Oh
uh
yeah, in the background.
yeah, the background of the money itself, right? So I'll tell you what really caught my ear, my mind, and my heart with that book is they talk about she's talking about how we got the Middle East to sell all their oil in dollars, right? And then Iraq stops, or they sell it in euros. In the year 2000, Iraq starts selling oil in euros. Coincidentally, 1 year later, there's a terrorist attack on America, and we end up in a war. And you're like,
With
was that
Iraq.
a coincidence? You know? So I'll tell you what's crazy about that. So, like I said, I was in the U.S. Army, and I served in Iraq, right? I fought in a war in Iraq for 12 months, for 1 year when I was 18 years old. And the mission of our
Wow.
unit was to secure an oil field, right? So what they briefed the unit on is, if we don't take this oil field, the bad guys will use the oil field, sell the oil, and get guns, right? Get weapons, get guns, do all this thing, and we'll just keep the fight going on forever because this is their stream of money, right? We take the oil field, all right? So we take the oil field, and then we're securing the oil field. Towards the end of our mission, towards the end of our deployment over there, what we have to do is train the Iraqi army and the Iraqi police to take over for us, right? The war's starting to draw down. Okay, so I leave Iraq in 2011. So I go 2010, come back 2011. 2016, 17, 18, sometime, I'm scrolling on Twitter, and the company BP, British Petroleum, they make a tweet about an oil field that they own in Iraq that produces $20 million in profit per day, right?
Oh
This was the oil field.
wow. Okay.
Bro, when I said I couldn't sleep at night, I couldn't sleep at night. I said, whoa, like the old people are sending young people to go fight wars over resources. So when Lynn Alden was talking about that in the book, about how, you know, we basically had to go make sure we had to deliver some freedom to Iraq to make sure that they were selling their oil in dollars, and how that we use our military to kind of force the use of the dollar. And then I have my own personal experience with this. I'm like, man, this is actually insane, bro. This is actually this. The game is a lot sicker than you would ever imagine, you know.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, if you think about it, the concept of printing money, or the ability to print money, would make you like a genie, right? It would make you, it would make you, that would be the closest thing to God that you can get on earth, right? And I say that to say this, like, if you see a lion eating a gazelle, right? You know that lion caught the gazelle. They had to go put in some type of work. The proof of work is you caught something to eat. Like, every species has to eat, right? It has to feed
Hmm.
somehow, right? So imagine that there was a lion that would snap its fingers and there's food right there. now it has an unfair advantage over everything else in the animal kingdom, right? That's what the ability to create money and force people is, right? Force people to use it. So if
Yeah.
I can create the money, so crypto, right? Like, your whatever crypto token, that's creating your own currency, right? Not a big deal, right? We as Bitcoiners will tell people stay away from that. But the difference between crypto and the US dollar is no one's forced to use that. Imagine if you were
Yeah.
forced to use Solana or you were forced to use Dogecoin, right? So the entire concept that it's not a free market. If we had the freedom to choose between the US dollar and this other money, or this other money, or this other money, and then the people who are in control of the dollar starts devaluing the currency, we'll say, oh, we're not going to use that anymore. We're just going to go to the next one, right? We would have the freedom to choose. If Apple starts doing things that we don't like or don't appreciate, we'd move on to Samsung,
Move away.
right?
Yeah.
So it's a free and open market until it comes to the money. We're forced to use
Yeah.
it. And if we're forced to use it and then they can devalue it, well, now they're stealing from us. So I always say that. I'm like, that kind of gives you like this genie like effect in the world. If you can spin up money, now you can spin up money and then buy assets from people, buy real assets from people with fake money. It just, yeah. Anyways, I know that was long winded, bro. I'm sorry. But
No,
those are
that
the
was
four books
awesome.
that I like.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. I see that actually gave me another just another thought. You have the lion that can snap its paws and create new food out of nothing. The only way for it to do that is to take it away from someone else,
Yep. Somebody who
right? And
would
that's
have to go. Imagine there's a cheetah chasing a gazelle, and then the gazelle disappears, and it ends up with
yeah.
the lion.
But that's exactly what's happening right now. But what's
Mhm.
happening is it's happening slowly. It's happening at 2% a year,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
you're right.
So what would your answer be to someone who says, "Oh, inflation is a good thing. We need inflation for this economy to run."
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how there used to be 180,000 millionaires, and now there's 40 million millionaires, but nobody has money. And you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, the inflation is creating more money, but it's not giving you more purchasing power, right?
Yeah.
So the reason why people don't complain about it or they see it as a good thing is because even some people are like, yeah, it's a good thing because the economy needs to grow and all this good stuff. And you're like, well, that would make sense. 2% would make sense if maybe we had to extract 2% of gold. I think that's where the number comes from,
It's like 1 to
right?
2%, yeah.
But if we don't have to expand the actual commodity that's backing the money, then why are we still expanding the money itself, right? So what ends up
Yeah.
happening is we inflate a bunch of things and we don't get any more purchasing power out of it, right? So you don't want to
Yeah.
be rich on paper, which inflation will make you rich on paper, and I seen this picture of this girl like maybe she was in Venezuela or whatever, and she had like all this money. I think it was on a wagon. She had like all this money that was
Oh.
worth nothing. And then Jameson Lop,
Oh, yeah.
he said like, don't worry, if you miss your opportunity to become a millionaire, don't worry, you'll still get your opportunity, right? They're like, yeah,
Oh,
just
yeah.
imagine keeping this going, right? So if we go from 180,000 millionaires to 40 million millionaires in America, if you just keep this going, everybody would be a millionaire. But what does
Yeah.
$1 million buy you? Probably a glass of milk, and
Yeah.
that's the inflation machine. So I think people just kind of accept the things that they were told and they don't stop to think about it. But I believe people will stop to think about it. And that's why I think Bitcoin is common sense, right? Because
Absolutely.
eventually things will just stop making sense to you.
Yeah. I want to ask you one other question. I know you get a lot of hate from people who say, "Oh, this guy switched over from talking about real estate." I saw one of your posts just a couple of days ago. Somebody was like, "Oh, you must be getting paid by the Bitcoin network to post about this." Like
Yeah.
to me, it just sounds like,
Satoshi's
"Oh,
one of my
like
homies.
yeah, like to me, it just sounds like, oh, this is like, how does somebody even think this way?" But clearly, there are a lot of people who do think this way. How would you answer that? Like, oh, you're trying to grift. You're a grifter. You thought about real estate. You thought about real assets before. Now you're talking about Bitcoin. You're just trying to pump your own bags. Well, how would you answer that?
One, I don't have enough money to pump the Bitcoin network. Neither do any of my followers, right? We're talking about
Yeah,
a $2 trillion market now, right?
the network isn't big enough. Yeah, like we
Yeah,
our networks aren't big enough. Yeah, yeah,
exactly. One. And two, I see Bitcoin as inevitable, right?
yeah,
I see it's inevitable. So this is we got one or two ways to go about it. You get on the train, you grow your wealth, you protect yourself from inflation, or you don't, right?
Yeah.
I've recognized it. You've recognized it. Hopefully, the people watching this have recognized it. So, Bitcoin's inevitable. So, I think that it's going to happen regardless. But what I'll say to people that say, okay, I went from this to this to this to this, right? Well, of course I did because I'm getting smarter, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course I did, right? Like, I reserved the right to change my mind. So, like I was saying to you earlier, on my journey, it started off with I just need to make money,
Mm.
right? You start off, you leave the nest, and you're like, I need to make money because I need to support myself, and that becomes okay. How can I make money? I made a lot of my money with e-commerce, and then you move to where am I going to store my money, right? Store my money in stocks, store my money in real estate. But this is just me learning and learning and learning. So we're talking about an 18-year-old kid that knows nothing, and now you're learning. And you say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to read all these finance books. And of course, they're going to tell you, put your money in the stock market, put your money in real estate. So as you get really good at playing this game, of course, you're telling people like, hey, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do. What you don't realize is that you might be good at real estate, but you don't know anything about money. You might make money in real estate, but you don't know anything about money. You might be good at
Yeah.
making money in the stock market. You don't know anything about money itself. So that's what Bitcoin made me realize is that, okay, you know how to make US dollars, good for you. But what do you know about money? Now, sometimes people will tell me, well, like, oh, you've made all this money trading stocks, you made all this money in real estate, you made all this money, and now you're telling people just to focus on Bitcoin, right? And I
Yeah.
say, well, think about the opportunity cost, right? So at my level of wealth and where I'm at, to somebody below me, you would say, okay, this guy has a lot of money, right? If you're broker than me, you would say, okay, you have a lot of money. But I look at all the people that I'm broker than, and I would say I would be way up there if I just focused on Bitcoin. There was an
Yeah.
opportunity cost for me putting my money into real estate and not Bitcoin. There was an opportunity cost for me not learning about Bitcoin as deeply as I should have. My first Bitcoin purchase was in 2017, right? So imagine from 2017 to 2025, all the money that I've made, if I just stored 30% of it in Bitcoin, I'd be way wealthier than I am now, right? So I kind of tell people like, hey, you want to learn the rules to the game that you're playing before you just hop in and start playing it, right? Because you can skip over learning all this, and a lot of people do. A lot of people who don't like Bitcoin or ignore Bitcoin or talk down on Bitcoin, the ones who are doing well financially, that's what they think. Look how far I've made it without this thing, and then I always think like you would be way further with way less work,
Yeah.
right? You wouldn't need 36 businesses, right? It would
Yeah.
be work, store your money, enjoy your family. Work, store your money, enjoy your family. It would be very simple, right? So there was an opportunity cost for me to take the long route. And I could have avoided all that if somebody would have said, yo, Chris, this is more serious than you would ever imagine. Don't
Mm.
buy Bitcoin thinking it's another stock. Don't buy Bitcoin as you get money from real estate and you're going to DCA into Bitcoin. It would make more sense to DCA into real estate, to buy the
Yeah.
Bitcoin and DCA into real estate versus to DCA into Bitcoin. You got what I'm saying? Because the Bitcoin is going to grow.
Yeah.
That's another thing, the opportunity cost. So, for example, somebody on my Twitter said that they had $70,000 in cash and they were considering putting it into Bitcoin or put some of it into an emergency savings account and then start to DCA in Bitcoin. I said it would make more sense to put it all into Bitcoin and DCA into an emergency savings account.
Oh, yeah, I get that. I get what you're saying.
You get what
That's
I'm
a really good
saying? There's an
idea. Yeah, yeah,
opportunity
yeah.
cost. You put
That's a good
because
way to think of it. Yeah.
if you would have put your 70 into Bitcoin last year, that gets you like 1.4, 1.5 Bitcoin, right? So now you're looking at your 70 is 150 now.
Mm.
Now you can, hey, I'm gonna keep 20 in cash. There's an opportunity cost for not being on the train of the best asset in the world. And I want people to open their minds to that. And that's what I would say to those people.
Yeah, that's a really good. I feel like what you said was really important. This is inevitable. We're going to it no matter what. Like it's not like we're trying to tell people, "Oh, buy it so that I can get exit liquidity." We don't need exit liquidity.
Yeah.
We are like I'm sure that you're going to probably hold your Bitcoin for the rest of your life. Like the majority of it,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not going to have to sell,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like you're not. It's not
Exactly.
even that
Yeah.
you don't want to sell it. You're not going to have to sell it
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be worth so much. Like think about it. In a few years, point 0.1 Bitcoin is going to be worth a couple $1 million,
Yep. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Right. Like,
This is inevitable. I think about it like this. This is what I was explaining to the Wealth Squad the other day. I said, okay, imagine this. Bitcoin is $5 million a coin,
mhm,
right? You borrow 5% of that, which is $250,000 a year, right? So you borrow 5% of that, but it's growing at 30% a year. When you borrow that $250,000, it's tax free, right? It's not income,
mhm,
and you don't sell your Bitcoin, right? Now, the same way that somebody right now could tell us like, hey, if you want to make easy money, all you got to do is go buy 4 apartment buildings, and you're like, well, that's going to cost me $10 million, right? It's going to be the same thing with Bitcoin. Hey, if you had a Bitcoin, you could just borrow against it. You could borrow against 5% of it. It grows at 30-40%, and you're good. And you're like, well, I don't have $5 million for Bitcoin, but you had
yeah,
the opportunity to buy it when it was 20 grand, when it was 50 grand, when it was 100 grand, right? So I think like imagine yourself in the future and then work your way backwards, right?
yeah.
So I look at it like that. Like we don't know what people will build on top of this, but
No
we know
idea.
it's going to grow, right? And when it
Exactly.
is, when there is a very normal, easy, safe way to borrow against some of your stack to buy a house for your family, cool, or you want to send your
Yeah.
kid to private school in Australia, cool. So yeah, one, we're not selling, and then two, we're helping set a floor price, right?
Yes.
So if we're consuming, if we're eating up all the Bitcoin between the everyday people and then the institutions, and we're the type of people who aren't going to sell, well, it's going to be hard for Bitcoin to fall minus 80% like it used to, because
Yeah.
you have a new type of buyer who won't sell. So if Michael Saylor, for example, holds, let's say he gets to 5% of all the Bitcoin, and that never moves, well, we're setting a higher floor price, right? So I just imagine life in the future and then play it backwards. And because I believe this is inevitable, of course I'm going to grab it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. Bitcoin holders set the floor price.
Yep.
If like Bitcoin, people think, oh, Bitcoin holders are just holding it, they're not doing anything. But what they're doing is they're actually supporting the network, because if they didn't set that floor price, then miners would have no incentive to mine,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that the network would be less secure because they're setting that floor price, because they're raising that floor price constantly. What they're doing is they're giving more and more miners an incentive to join the network, to increase the hash power, to um, to create more miners that are more efficient.
And it's
That
defending the system.
exactly, and then that actually goes into energy use. It makes the energy use that we have more efficient. It makes it so
Mm-hmm.
that we can have other technologies that are built on top of mining technology that allows us to save energy, to save the environment. Oh my god, it's like
Yeah,
the
it's
rabbit
crazy.
hole doesn't end.
Yeah, you start to think like this is amazing, right? Like this is
Yeah,
actually amazing. And
yeah,
what I wanted to say about Bitcoin is like, okay, I look at it like there's Bitcoin the asset, there's Bitcoin the network, right? And a lot of people are like, like the Dookie coiners, a lot of people, they're just interested in growing their money, right? And then I
yeah,
say, okay, well, if you came to me and say, hey, I need a place to grow my money in the most reasonable way possible, I would say Bitcoin, right?
yeah,
Because look at the all-time chart, right? Like what's going to
yeah,
grow faster than Bitcoin? At a very predictable way. So the people who are only interested in, I'm just trying to get wealthier, bro. Okay, Bitcoin. And then there's the people that say, hey, I'm not just going to put my money in anything. I need to support something that can help change the world, that can help, like impact lives. Okay, Bitcoin. So
yeah,
you're like, either way I see it, you're like, there's this amazing asset. There's the network that's tied to the asset. They feed off of each other, and we make the world a better place. Save the
yeah,
money,
and
save the world. Fix the money, save the world.
it aligns the it aligns the goals of people who are moral, who have morals,
Yep.
and the people who don't.
Yep.
Because everybody, the people who have morals, they're going to be getting wealthier. But then the people who don't, if they hold Bitcoin, they're also going to be getting wealthier by holding Bitcoin. So it basically makes everybody fight for the same goal.
Exactly. You know something I noticed, and maybe you can tell me if you noticed this too. It also stops the whole like tit for tat thing with finance. So, for instance, I drew on my phone I drew like a triangle, and I was like, okay, this is how I used to see money, and this is how I see money now. So before Bitcoin, after Bitcoin, right? So to give your audience an illustration, savings in the fiat world, saving is would be one of the smaller parts of the triangle, right? Because you can't save your money because the money will just deteriorate. But in Bitcoin, if you're saving in Bitcoin, that will be majority of the triangle, right? So,
Hmm.
anyways, I draw this just using my phone real quick, and then I upload it on Twitter, and I say, "Hey, can somebody make this a better graphic? I'm going to make a video about it." And then naturally a bunch of Bitcoiners made it, right? They made it for free, right? They're like, okay, I know how to do at least something simple. So they just made it. And then what ends up happening is the graphic design part of Twitter start finding it. And they're like, hey, DM me and I'll tell you my fee. I'll tell you my fee. I'll tell you my fee, right? And you're like, isn't that interesting that there's a half of these people willing to do it for free and they did it for free, and the other half of the people, they were like, I make my living doing this thing, therefore I need to get paid for it, right? And I start to think, well, the Bitcoiner sees it like, I'll make this for free, you make the video for free, and everybody gets to learn about Bitcoin, right? It's
Yeah,
like a positive sum game. You're going to put your energy into making the video. I'm going to put my energy into designing this graphic. Everybody wins. The audience gets to learn, blah, blah. But on the other side of things, on the
yeah,
fiat side of things, you see like, no, I'm not making a move unless I get paid for it. And the Bitcoiners like, the market's
yeah.
going to take care of us financially. So I even
It's like
noticed like,
short term and long term, basically, right?
yeah,
Like if somebody had just made it for you, if some graphic designer had made it for you, I'm sure you would have commissioned them to make other stuff for you, and it
yep,
would just spread their name,
yep,
right?
yep,
Like, have you seen Michael Saylor? He posts these AI pictures, LA
yeah.
Doger.
hmm
Like that's the person who makes them. Their account blew up because they
Oh,
made them for free for Michael Saylor.
yeah, I didn't realize that somebody. Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was an artist doing that.
Yeah, there's an artist doing it. He tags them on every single picture. But then think about it. Like if a
Oh,
person's like, no, I'm gonna charge you $1,000 for each
yeah,
picture,
yeah,
he's gonna be like, yo, I'll
it's.
find another some. I'll find
I'll
somebody else.
find somebody. Yes, like we can
Yeah.
help each other in another way other than like. So then what happens is you didn't pay me to come on your podcast. I didn't pay you to be on your podcast. It's
Yeah.
just we just want to talk and help, and like we
Yeah.
just want to like the market's going to take care of us.
Absolutely. Okay,
Cool.
and I have one last question for you here. I want to ask you. This is a question that I ask all my audience. So, or sorry, all my guests. What do you think is the most important downstream effect of Bitcoin over the next like 10, 20, 30 years?
I think it allows people to heal, man. That's kind of what it is. Kind of allows people to heal because it changes your time preference,
Yeah.
right? When it changes your time preference, this is why you see some people say like, "Man, somehow I became a Bitcoiner and I started, working out more. I started eating better. I started doing all this."
Oh
It's
yeah.
your it's your time preference, right? So I think it slows down your mind. You're not just thinking about survival. So I think what happens in society when we don't think about survival 24/7 is now we can focus on building friendships. We can focus on being present parents. We can focus on donating our time and becoming coaches for our children's sports team. We can think about things other than making money.
Yeah.
So I think in a way that's probably going to have a bigger effect than what we think, where people are like, hey, I'm not really like I said, I used to wake up and just chart and trade and do all this stuff, and now I wake up and I'm just like, man, I'm taking my kid to school, like I'm just gonna kick it, like everything is smooth, water my grass, like what am I going to eat today, what am I learning today, so I think that Bitcoin slows down uh, uh, that rush and all the things in your mind, and I think on a case by case basis, that's how we heal society.
So do you think that it's going to make people less transactional? They're going to be more,
Yep.
um, they're going to be more connected with one another. They're going to be
Yep.
more bonds, better bonds with other people. Like you're not going to be thinking, oh, how can I screw this guy over, or what can I get out of this guy, and
Yep.
how can he help me? Instead of thinking, oh, how can I help him?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. I think that because we've never seen a world like this, or we've never seen society like this, it's like slowly becoming like more obvious. Like, man, I don't need to So if one of my friends needs help, or maybe somebody I don't know, they need help, or they DM me and they're like, "Hey, what should I do about this?" Or I'm like, "Here's the answer." I'm not gonna say, "Oh, pay me this," and
Yeah.
like I'm just like, "Hey, I just want to help," because I'm getting my money. The market's gonna make me wealthier,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
I actually
slow
have a
down on
story
it.
about that. I have a story about that. So, my sister-in-law, she wanted to get some real estate advice from a friend, and her friend's like, "Oh, you have to pay me for my time." I'm just thinking, is that a friend?
Nope,
Right? Like that's crazy to me.
that's insane.
That's
Actually,
insane. Like it was
like legit, her friend or like someone she knew.
actually. I was trying to say it's her friend because I didn't want to make it sound bad. It was actually her uncle, which is even
That's
worse.
that fiat mindset, man. That's that
That's
fiat.
insane.
That's in. I guarantee if her uncle was a Bitcoiner, she's like, hey, uncle, can you explain this Bitcoin thing to me? That would be a 40-hour conversation spanning
Absolutely.
over a week for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's what I mean. It's little things like that, but we don't realize how much the money thing, affects us all.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. Man, that was an amazing conversation. I actually want to have you plug yourself. Just talk about your podcast, man. Like, give my audience, because I know my audience is going to like this conversation. I know they're going to want to find you. How can they find you?
Cool. So on YouTube, just search Bit by Bit Chris Johnson, and
Amazing.
it'll pop up. On Twitter, CJ underscore Johnson 170H. And then on Instagram, Chris, four S's, Johnson, right? They're both pages are verified. Those are my only pages. I'm never going to DM you, or tell you to send me this or send me that. There's a lot of scammers out there. So only the verified pages. But yeah, you guys, I'm just talking about Bitcoin every day, trying to figure out different ways, different analogies that I can use to help people kind of get this through their mind, and finding all the contradictions in the fiat world, and yeah, just here to spread the message.
And I got to give you some props, man. Your analogies and your content have gotten better over time, which is amazing. It's just, you've been putting the work in, and it shows.
Thank you, thank you. What I've been doing, what I've been doing is I got this video uploading right now on X. So yesterday I did a 10-minute video, and then today I did another one, but it hasn't uploaded yet. And I just like wake up in the morning, and then after I take my kid to school, I'm like, what am I learning about today? Or what am I thinking about today? And I'll just sit and make a video about it. And I'm
That's
like,
it.
this is kind of cool because all the people that, want to hear me talk, like, cool, and the Bitcoin news reposted one of my videos, and I got me a bunch of new followers. And I'm like, wow, as long as people keep supporting the videos, I'll keep making them. And they
Absolutely.
keep throw me a
That's
retweet and
it.
I'll make another one.
Yeah,
Everybody helps
exactly.
everybody.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Awesome, man. Chris, that was a really great conversation. I really enjoyed that. Any last words, any last tips for my audience or anything like that?
The main thing I want to say, you guys, is to stay curious, right? To
That's it.
challenge everything that you think you know, right? So stay curious. That's the biggest message. Curiosity and consistency will take you everywhere you want to go.
That's it. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I really, really appreciate your time, man. I really hope that people got this message from you. You're like I said, I'm constant. I think I know a lot about Bitcoin, but then when I see your content, I learn a lot more just every single time I tune in. So appreciate your
Thanks. Hey,
time, man.
I learn from you too, bro. I watch your YouTube all the time. I'm learning from you too.
Appreciate it. Amazing, amazing. All right, let
Well,
me
thanks for
let
having me.
me